I told T.I. he should kick that boy last year. If T.I. would have kicked that boy last year, that boy wouldn't have had to jack him up today.
Charleston White just dropped a bomb on King Harris for disrespecting 50 Cent, and it's not what you think. White is standing firmly with 50 on this one, and King Harris is on the receiving end. In this video, I'm breaking down everything White said about King and what it actually means for the young rapper. But before we get into it, if you're here for the real, unfiltered breakdowns nobody else is giving you, hit subscribe and tap that bell right now. You don't want to miss what's coming. The beef reignites. The question sitting at the center of all this is straightforward. What happens when somebody's son jumps into a decades-old rap beef, drags a dead woman into it, and tries to ride for his living mother on Instagram? That is exactly what went down around February 20th, 2026, and it started the way most things start in hip-hop, with old smoke that never fully cleared. 50 Cent and T.I. have had it out for each other since 2007. During a Hot 97 interview that year, 50 questioned anybody walking around calling themselves the king of hip-hop. Everybody knew that was a direct shot at T.I., who had crowned himself King of the South after dropping his 2006 album, King. Sitting down with Angie Martinez, 50 asked flat out, who decides that, the fans or the rapper? T.I. took that personally, and when 50 pulled up to T.I.'s Screamfest stage alongside Jay-Z and Kanye West later that year, the tension finally had a face and a name. In 2008, T.I.'s federal gun case wrapped up with a one-year sentence when he was staring down potential decades. 50 Cent hopped on G-Unit's You So Tough and rapped about the math not adding up. 10 machine guns, 12 months. The bars were saying out loud what everybody in the hood was already whispering. Snitch. T.I. never let that go. In September 2010, T.I. and Tiny caught drug charges, possession resembling ecstasy. Tipped at 11 months for violating parole. 50 Cent got on the internet questioning why Tiny didn't just take the fall for her man. T.I. addressed it in a 2011 Vibe interview and shut it completely down. Said nobody in his family was getting pressured into catching a case for anybody, and anyone suggesting otherwise was a coward, straight up. They squashed it in late 2011 through a phone call set up by mutual homies. 50 told Vibe neither one of them actually asked for the call, it just happened through people they both rocked with. For the next several years, it went quiet. The beef went to sleep, but it never died. Starting July 2020, on 50 Cent's 45th birthday, T.I. called him out for a versus battle on Instagram, told 50 to pull up with 20 records and get this work. 50 laughed that off, posting that somebody passed Tip the same weed they gave Smokey and Friday. T.I. kept pressing, went on Hot 97, told Ebro they were similarly stacked, said there was a 900-pound gorilla living inside him. By September 2020, T.I. was demanding a date, calling 50 a young baboon face, while 50 trolled back about T.I.'s beard and asked where his trap museum exhibit was. They reportedly chopped it up behind closed doors while doing shows together in L.A., but nothing materialized. 50 told The Morning Hustle in 2021 that once people got back outside, the whole versus format just stopped making sense. T.I. even pressed him on stage at the September 2021 BMF premiere afterparty, telling the crowd to put pressure on 50. 50 stood there, grinned, and did absolutely nothing. Then February 2026 pulled up. On February 6th, T.I. hopped on the Nightcap podcast and brought the Versus talk back, said 50 was ducking smoke, said he originally wanted Gucci but switched to 50 and 50 wasn't trying to get down. 50 slid back the very next day, posting old Crime Stoppers footage and a clip of T.I.'s 2008 testimony from the Felony Johnson murder case, captioning it as a warning to keep his name out of conversations. He tagged T.I. King Rat. By February 12th, after dropping a King Rat comment on a T.I. and Kevin Hart video, T.I. came back swinging, said he had the paperwork on 50, called him soft, said he'd lost all respect. On February 22nd, T.I. sat down on $1 million worth of game and aired it all out, said they had already shaken hands on the verses while doing shows in L.A., and 50 backed straight out, said it made him question 50's whole character. That same day, 50 Cent posted a photo of Tiny Harris on Instagram, telling T.I. to stop saying his name. T.I. hit the comments, said it didn't matter what picture he posted, 50 was still beneath him. And then King Harris slid into the picture. King, T.I. and Tiny's son, around 21 years old, jumped on Instagram with an expletive-loaded rant riding hard for his mama. He brought up 50 Cent's mother, Sabrina Jackson, who passed away in 1983 when 50 was only 8 years old. King told 50 to go dig her up, posted a tombstone image with the caption, "This where your mama at?" Said his mama was a legend, told 50 to put some respect on it, told him to post a picture of his own mother, then reminded him she was in the ground. 50 Cent's mother's death, widely reported as tied to a drug overdose, is one of the most well-known traumas in all of hip-hop. He has spoken on it for decades, described it as the thing that shaped everything about how he moves, and now a 21-year-old had turned it into an Instagram post. That night and the next day, T.I. dropped War, a warning shot about a hibernating bear that shouldn't have been poked, a sleeping giant that shouldn't have been woken. He followed with The Right One, going at 50's legacy and questioning why 50 never had that same energy for the white boys and only came for his own people. Then came Lessons, with artwork showing a skeletal 50 Cent from his All Things Fall Apart role. T.I.'s sons jumped in the trenches with him. Damani dropped Miss Jackson, flipping an Outkast sample with burning house artwork, a whole open letter dressed as a family statement. King dropped Say Less, a video where he rocked a shirt with 50 Cent's late mother's face printed on it, sparked a blunt pointed directly at the image, and rapped about mama being in the grave. Rick Ross co-signed on site, commented he wanted King's shirt in a 3X, a public stamp from a man who spent over a decade looking for any angle to line up shots at 50. 50 Cent did not drop a single bar. He compared King to Pepe the Frog, turned the whole rant into a meme to make it look goofy, posted a childhood photo of King with a "God don't like ugly" caption. When Tina Lawless reposted the tiny photo showing love, 50 came back with a Tina photo and a Solange elevator gif, writing that things were getting weird. Kids, grandmothers, everybody pulled into the mix. He wiped the beef posts from his page and wrote, "I'm out of here. You guys hurt my feelings." Then handed out what he called the stupid award to T.I. And then, right in the middle of all this chaos, Charleston White pulled up. Charleston White's reality check. In late February 2026, across multiple live streams and social media posts, Charleston White delivered his verdict on King Harris's rant. His core message was as blunt as a brick through a windshield. T.I. should have taught his son to stay out of grown people's business. He called King's involvement straight up young boy overreach, a shorty inserting himself into a war between two OGs who had been going at it for nearly 2 decades. But White did more than just run his mouth. He posted a photo of T.I.'s deceased sister, matching the exact energy of the mama for mama dynamic that King had kicked off. His logic was simple. If King could drag 50 Cent's dead mother out of the grave and onto an Instagram post, then nobody's family was off limits. Nobody's. He called out what he saw as a blatant double standard. The same people gassing King up for disrespecting a dead woman were coming at White for doing the exact same thing with T.I.'s people. White positioned himself as a real one with a genuine opinion, not some random clout chaser looking for views. He pointed out that if T.I. was truly plugged in as a father, then King's behavior was a direct reflection of failed parenting.
And King is behaving and going on with these kind of actions and inactions and traits and characteristics.
And White wasn't done. In that same stream, he went deeper, broke down what King's whole behavior actually revealed, not just about King himself, but about the path he was headed down, the environment that raised him, and the household that shaped every single one of those decisions.
Of a delinquent, criminal-minded boy, then you open up and you're failing as a father, tipster. Clifford?
White calling T.I. tipster and Clifford wasn't accidental. Those were calculated, deliberate choices, surgical strikes designed to dismantle the man's entire identity, strip away the King of the South title, tear down the mythology, reduce the whole persona to a government name nobody in the streets actually calls him. White understood that in this culture, the name you carry is everything, and he was going straight for it. But White wasn't just commentating from the outside looking in. He made it clear he had skin in the game. He claimed he had been locked in with 50 Cent and G-Unit behind closed doors for years, said he'd been placed on G-Unit records and had been in direct contact with 50 privately this whole time. He wasn't positioning himself as a fan or a spectator. He was presenting himself as a natural ally, somebody already embedded in 50's world, somebody 50 could actually call on because the foundation was already there. In his live streams, he said it plain and simple. He was working with 50 Cent, and he was riding with 50 until the wheels completely fell off.
Got the best rapping in it. Tell T.I. I got the best diss song he can have right now. Boy can't find no better diss song.
This was not a man sitting on the sidelines breaking down the highlights. White was actively auditioning, putting himself directly in front of 50 Cent and demanding to be used. He was calling for the tag, like a wrestler stretched out on the ropes, hand wide open, body leaning over the ring, waiting for his partner to slap his palm and let him loose.
I'm on the set of 50 couldn't activate. 50 Cent tried to said don't nobody activate T.I. like I do it. You're a tippy toe.
White's point was simple. 50 had tried to light T.I. up and couldn't quite finish the job. White believed he was the missing piece, the one person who actually had the toolkit, the history, and the absolute reckless disregard for consequences required to get deep under the entire Harris family skin. And judging by the avalanche of responses his post pulled in, that wasn't just talk. But that raises the real question. Who exactly is Charleston White, and why does his voice actually move the needle when he decides to weigh in on something? White is a 48-year-old comedian, motivational speaker, and social media personality out of Fort Worth, Texas. At 7 years old, he lost his right eye in an accident. childhood trauma that rewired how he moved through the world from the very beginning. Around 14, he was caught up in a robbery at a Foot Locker in Arlington, Texas, that turned fatal when someone he was running with shot and killed a store clerk. White testified against the shooter and served time in juvenile facilities. He later came out the other side, earned a criminal justice degree from Texas Wesleyan University, and co-founded HYPE, a nonprofit built entirely around mentoring at-risk youth and pulling them back from the same edge that nearly swallowed him. His entire brand is constructed around saying what everyone else is too calculated or too scared to say, and then saying it at full volume until the room has no choice but to hear it. He wears the snitch label from his juvenile testimony not as a wound, but as a weapon. He flips it deliberately, using it to go directly at rappers, street culture, and what he consistently calls the deep hypocrisy rotting at the core of the culture. A world that celebrates cooperating with authorities when it's convenient and condemns it when it isn't, depending entirely on who's holding the mic and how many followers they've accumulated. He's caught charges for aggravated assault and animal cruelty. Charges he maintains were either fabricated or straight self-defense, which only adds another layer of contradiction to a persona that has always run entirely on contradictions. In September 2025, he got physically removed from Tougaloo College after going in hard on HBCUs, dismissing systemic racism and calling students poor during a debate event that collapsed almost immediately. His history with the Harris family specifically runs back well before any of this 2026 noise. White has spoken openly about past diss records aimed at T.I., alleged that T.I. once tried to physically run up on him, and noted that T.I. had publicly called him a parasite on record. When King had previously threatened White, White responded with the kind of language that left absolutely zero room for anyone to wonder if he was serious. This was not a fresh beef getting started. This was old beef getting reloaded with brand new ammunition.
Goddamn it, I told T.I. he should have kicked that boy last year. If T.I. would have kicked that boy last year, that boy wouldn't have had to jack him up today.
And White had a specific moment locked in his memory when he said all of that. He was pointing directly at King's November 2023 explosion at an Atlanta Falcons game, the moment that first put King's temper, his defiance, and his complete inability to back down on full display for the entire country to witness.
Yeah, the boy showing out at the Falcon game, embarrassing the family. This is the it's King, little ugly.
For White, King's 2026 rant was never some random isolated explosion. It was the inevitable result of a pattern that T.I. had consistently refused to address. A son who had been moving reckless for years with zero real consequences, protected by his father's fame and his family's money, right up until the day he decided to pick smoke with somebody who genuinely did not care about any of that. A pattern of controversy. King Harris did not materialize out of nowhere for the 50 Cent confrontation. By February 2026, this 21-year-old had already built an entire highlight reel of public incidents, each one painting a clearer picture of a young man who was impulsive, loyal to a fault, and still genuinely wrestling with what it means to carry the weight of being one of Atlanta's most famous names. The first major moment hit in May 2022. A 17-year-old King was live on Instagram at a Waffle House in the Atlanta area, and the whole thing kicked off over pickles on his order. When staff enforced a no-cursing policy after he complained, the situation went from zero to completely unhinged in seconds. King climbed directly onto the counter, got in an employee's face, and threatened to pistol whip the worker before walking out with his corrected order, leaving behind a viral video that would follow him for years. T.I. addressed it on his own Instagram Live, said he and King's uncles had already pulled up on him and were genuinely confused by the whole situation, told his son to go live his life and stop entertaining low-energy circumstances, advice that, looking back, went completely and totally unheeded. August 2022 brought charges in Pickens County, speeding, driving on a suspended license, and DUI of drugs. King missed his court date and a bench warrant dropped. That warrant finally caught up with him in October 2024 when Dunwoody police pulled over his BMW after it nearly clipped a squad car pulling out of a gas station. Officers smelled weed and spotted a strap hosted on his hip. He got booked into DeKalb County Jail on the old warrant and released the next day after the warrant was recalled. But the incident that foreshadowed the 50 Cent confrontation most directly went down in November 2023 at an Atlanta Falcons game. King was live streaming from a suite when an argument erupted between him and his parents over how he was actually raised. The core issue was raw and real. King was rejecting the silver spoon narrative, insisting he spent the majority of his childhood at his grandmother's house in conditions nobody in his family wanted to publicly acknowledge. T.I. pushed back hard, asking King directly if he had ever woken up with a roach crawling across his face. Tiny framed the grandmother situation completely differently, said King went there because he could get away with more, not because things were harder. The conversation stopped being verbal. T.I. put King in a headlock while yelling that he was embarrassing himself and the entire family, the live stream catching every single second of it without mercy. Brother Damani tried to publicly smooth things over afterward, called it a misunderstanding, told everybody to just relax and let it pass. T.I. posted about family unity, but the internet had already locked in exactly what it needed to see. The footage even ignited paternity rumors, speculation circulating that T.I. wasn't King's biological father at all. Tiny shut that down immediately and completely, calling it the most egregious lie she had ever encountered.
Now all of a sudden, boy, you disrespecting Tippy? You done got so, well, you disrespecting Tiny and Chippy.
White had watched every single one of those moments unfold in real time, and his verdict was locked in long before February 2026 ever arrived. What King needed was never a cosign or a consolation. He needed discipline, accountability, someone in his corner willing to tell him the truth instead of gassing him up every time he crossed the line. But White's breakdown of the Falcons incident specifically wasn't one-dimensional. He didn't just come in swinging. He acknowledged that King's pain was real, that the frustration of growing up in a famous household while feeling unseen and misunderstood was genuine. But underneath that pain, White saw something else building, something that had nothing to do with struggle and everything to do with entitlement that had never once been checked.
You was born into a situation and circumstances and an environment that most kids dream about. You wasn't born into some horrible conditions.
White looked directly into that camera and told King the truth nobody around him had the courage to say. You were born into a life that kids from the actual hood would trade everything they owned just to touch for a single day. You were not raised in treacherous conditions. You were not out here surviving anything. You were living comfortable. And that anger you've been performing for the internet is not standing on business. It is standing on entitlement, pure and simple. And that phrase, standing on business, actually became its own side story in 2024. King had claimed he originated it during the Falcons incident, and when comedian Drewski used it in a skit, King said he would pull up on him. What looked like it could escalate into something ugly got handled face-to-face at Quavo's Honcho Day event. Drewski confirmed King showed up, they dealt with it directly, and that was the end of it. No smoke, no drama. In January 2025, King went viral again, this time talking openly about his open relationship with his son's mother, Jania Nana Epps. Said she had no issue with him being with other women and told people not to bother trying to expose him for something his girl already knew about and was fully comfortable with. The internet split exactly how you'd expect. Some respected the transparency. Others saw a young father who seemed far more comfortable with the attention than with the actual weight of what he was saying. Then, July 2025 brought something significantly heavier. Longtime accuser Sabrina Peterson resurfaced trafficking and exploitation allegations, this time naming King directly, alongside T.I. and Tiny. Peterson claimed she had receipts, text messages she said were from King to a young woman she described as trafficked. The family denied every single word of it, called it straight propaganda rooted in a personal grudge that dated back to 2021. No criminal charges have ever been filed. The family pursued defamation action against Peterson, and related civil suits resulted in dismissals, with Peterson ordered to pay roughly $97,000 in one ruling. The allegations remain entirely unproven in any court. All of that context exists for one reason. It paints the complete picture of exactly who King Harris was when he walked into February 2026. Passionate, impulsive, unconditionally down for his family, and completely unafraid to push things further than anyone around him anticipated or wanted.
50's other wars. The T.I. and King Harris situation did not happen inside a vacuum. Throughout 2025 and into early 2026, 50 Cent was running an entire war room of simultaneous conflicts, each one showcasing the same signature formula: memes over music, surveillance footage over diss tracks, petty Instagram captions over actual bars. The Big Meat situation was rooted in betrayal more than competition. 50 had executive produced BMF, the Stars series starring Meech's son Lil Meech and telling the full story of the Black Mafia family empire. But after Big Meech came home from prison in early 2025, having served roughly 18 years of a 30-year bid, and his February 13th Welcome Home concert connected to Rick Ross, 50 started posting rap memes, old booking photos, and images referencing Tammy Cowens, a former BMF associate alleged to have been cooperating with federal investigators. He tagged Meech a slick rat and made explosive claims about Lil Meech developing substance issues on the BMF set that required rehabilitation. Meech responded the only way his code allowed, repeatedly posting death before dishonor. The situation simmered through April 2025 and well beyond, never fully detonating, but never cooling down enough for anyone to stop watching. Rick Ross entered the frame from multiple angles, each one sharper and more deliberate than the last. Their history traces back to around 2009, rooted in what Tony Yayo described as a hospitality clash. 50 never dapped Ross up at an industry event, violating an unspoken Southern custom that Ross took as a calculated act of disrespect. From one handshake that never happened, a decade-long war got constructed brick by brick. In August 2025, Ross dropped a poolside video clowning 50's early Interscope deal, called it horrendous, questioned why nobody in 50's camp ever thought to renegotiate after the debut went diamond, and implied that the man who built an empire on dominance actually got outmaneuvered by the very industry he claimed to conquer. Ross also embedded himself in the Big Meech drama through concert cosigns and wove himself directly into the T.I. situation by publicly endorsing King Harris's diss track shirt, the one printed with 50 Cent's late mother's photograph. Ross asking for that shirt in a 3X was not camaraderie. It was a declaration of war delivered with the calm, unhurried menace of a man who had been waiting years for exactly this opening. The Jim Jones situation was 50 Cent pettiness distilled down to its most surgical and devastating form. In February 2026, 50 posted grainy, dated security camera footage of Jones, with Mino, Fabulous, and Dave East in tow, trying to kick open a locked Bronx podcast studio door after the power and lights had already been cut for unpaid rent. The footage was embarrassing, perfectly timed, and completely impossible to recover from. 50 then shared the actual eviction notice, addressed to Joseph Jones, government name, zero stage name, maximum disrespect, and captioned it asking if Jones wanted to be friends and suggesting they just rap about the whole situation. He alleged the studio owed somewhere between $80,000 and $180,000 through his building management company, IFC Management. It was a beef waged entirely through landlord-tenant law and real estate paperwork, and somehow it landed harder than any diss track ever could have. Getting evicted by your own ops is a different category of loss that no amount of bars will ever fix.
And then there was Marquise Jackson, 50 Cent's own son, one of hip-hop's most visible and most painful ongoing estrangements. Father's Day 2025 brought another wave of pointed memes from Marquise, publicly questioning whether the polished image of a focused businessman matched the private reality of a man who had seemingly walked away from his firstborn entirely. Throughout 2025 and into 2026, Marquise was spotted spending time in Big Meech and Lil Meech's circle, which handed 50's opponents a fresh weapon to brandish publicly every single week. Their history includes a 2022 moment where 50 publicly offered $6,700 for 24 hours of quality time with his son, a gesture that read either as an olive branch or a calculated insult, entirely depending on which side of that estrangement you were standing on. For King Harris to weaponize motherhood and the grave against a man who had spent years publicly distancing himself from his own child stacked an irony so thick onto this entire situation that the internet caught it immediately and never let it go. What connects every single one of these conflicts, Meech, Ross, Jones, Marquise, is 50 Cent's consistent, almost algorithmic approach to confrontation. He does not respond with music. He responds with content. Memes, screenshots, old footage, eviction notices, edited images, and perfectly timed deletions that keep the conversation alive while denying his opponents the satisfaction of a real direct engagement. His enemies drop diss tracks. He drops Instagram posts, and somehow, against every logical expectation, he stays at the absolute center of every conversation without ever stepping anywhere near a microphone. The man turned trolling into a full operational empire. His phone is the weapon. The internet is the battlefield. That is the exact world the T.I. beef lived inside of. When T.I. reignited the Versus conversation, 50 was already deployed across multiple active fronts simultaneously, and his response to King Harris, memes, Pepe comparisons, childhood photo edits, and strategic silence was identical to how he was managing Meech, Ross, Jones, and his own son at the exact same time. He was not avoiding King, he was filing King under the same category as everyone else. Content to be managed, not a threat worth addressing with anything more than a well-timed caption. Fan reactions and T.I.'s album rollout. The internet did not watch this one from a distance. It chose sides with the focused intensity of a courtroom that had already reached a verdict before the first argument was ever made. It built memes that traveled faster than any diss track ever could. It tracked every release and every deletion with the obsessive precision of dedicated hip-hop war correspondents. And it argued relentlessly, viciously, and occasionally brilliantly about exactly where the line sits between writing for your mother and disrespecting somebody's dead. Fan reaction split almost exactly down the middle, with each side dug in so deep that no evidence from the opposing camp was moving anybody. On X, high engagement posts about King's rant generated tens of thousands of interactions, comments ranging from passionate cosigns, calling King the most loyal son in the game, to fierce condemnation from fans who called the grave references flat out foul, a violation of the culture's unwritten rules about respecting the dead, and a line that cannot be uncrossed once someone steps over it. Reddit threads fractured into sub-debates that each could have run for a week on their own. Some argued that 50 had lost every significant beef outside of Ja Rule, propped up by Eminem and Dre during his peak and coasting ever since on a carefully maintained illusion of invincibility. Others pointed out that 50's entire relationship with Marquise, or the complete absence of one, meant he surrendered any moral authority to declare families sacred the moment he spent years publicly dismissing his own firstborn.
Charleston White's involvement pulled its own divided reaction. His supporters saw pure, unwavering consistency, a man who had always maintained that dragging the dead into public beef crosses a line. Full stop, No exceptions. His detractors saw selective outrage and transparent clout chasing, pointing out that White had been publicly going after Tiny Harris for years without generating anywhere near the same level of backlash from the same crowd, now elevating his moral position. Rick Ross co-signing King's diss track shirt, the one bearing 50 Cent's late mother's photograph, split fans between those who called it genuine solidarity from someone who understood family loyalty, and those who called it obvious opportunism from a man carrying a decade's worth of his own reasons to wound 50, who would have co-signed anything that hit the target, regardless of how sacred the imagery was. Ross's involvement also forced a question the culture could not sidestep. Did that shirt, a piece of merchandise featuring a dead woman's face, worn in a music video by the son of her son's opponent, represent a new low in beef culture? Or was it just the logical destination of a genre that has always treated personal pain as content? Meanwhile, T.I. was converting every ounce of this chaos into direct fuel for Kill the King, his self-described final album, with the precision of a 25-year veteran who understood exactly how to transform controversy into commerce and smoke into streams. The lead single, Let Him Know, produced by Pharrell Williams and directed by Hype Williams, dropped directly in the middle of peak beef activity and climbed the Billboard Hot 100 to around number 43, his highest solo charting position in over a decade. The visual featured cars moving through Atlanta and Miami, a Pharrell cameo adding genuine production credibility, and Young Dro ad-libs threading the new T.I. directly back to the classic T.I. in a way that felt both nostalgic and fully charged. T.I. confirmed his retirement at the 2026 Grammys, framing the album as his definitive closing statement after a quarter century, a career-ending release that would simply not exist in its current form without the oxygen this beef provided. The smoke gave the music life. The music gave the smoke structure. It was symbiotic in a way that would have felt purely cynical if it wasn't so undeniably effective. The coordination was impossible to miss. Every single release was calibrated to the exact moment in the drama cycle with surgical precision. T.I. dropped War the same night King's Rant went viral. The right one arrived the next day. Lessons landed within the week with that devastating skeletal artwork. Snippets tied to the Kill the King rollout followed on a schedule that ran like a promotional calendar built by someone who understood that every headline was a billboard and every comment section was a live focus group. Damani and King dropped their records within days of each other. T.I.'s What Bully joined the rotation, targeting 50's long history of punching down at smaller targets while consistently avoiding anyone capable of swinging back with equal force. The entire Harris household had transformed into a fully operational content factory, running around the clock. Industry observers, including DJ academics, drew comparisons to Drake versus Kendrick in terms of cultural weight, though the comparison actually exposed how completely lopsided this situation was. Drake and Kendrick traded bars for bars. T.I. and his sons released track after track after track. 50 Cent put absolutely nothing on wax. The musical output was overwhelmingly, almost comically one-sided, which either proved T.I. was running the scoreboard entirely, or proved that 50 had mastered the rare ability to dominate a cultural conversation without contributing a single note to it. The answer depended entirely on what your personal definition of winning actually looked like. If this breakdown hit different, smash that like button, drop your take in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed, because the next one is already loading.